right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session. Super excited that you've all chosen to join us today. We're going to give everyone just a couple of minutes to trickle in. In the meantime, feel free to drop a message in the chat. Let us know where you're from. Say hello to everyone. Again, super excited that you're all here. If you're here to learn about how to build a secure, effective, generative AI-based chatbot fast with Snowflake and Dataiku, you're in the right spot. So Pat and Carsten will kick us off in a little bit, but in the meantime, I just wanted to let you know that you'll be able to leave your questions in the section on the right that's marked with a question mark. Please do that instead of leaving it in the chat. It just makes it easier for us. And then also just know that the session today will be recorded and we will be sending that out to all of you after the session. Okay, all set. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to you, Pat and Carsten.
Cool. Thanks, Joy. I guess we can do quick, where are you from intros. What do you think? Okay, so as you can tell from my background, I'm in Brooklyn, New York. Where are you, Carsten?
Yeah, I'm in Fürth in Germany. That's near Nuremberg. That's northern parts of Bavaria, for those who are not familiar with that place.
I once went skiing like Zugspitze when I was in college. Yeah, but my friend tore his ACL. It was like too late in the season, so it was too. Yeah, but I love Bavaria.
Yeah, definitely not a bad place to live in. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Cool. What do you think? Should we give another 2 minutes?
Maybe 1 more minute. But...
Yeah. I am from Boston though, so same as Marissa.
Yeah, I'm from near Stuttgart. So actually a Swabian, now living in Franconia. Franconians are very keen on saying they're in Franconia, not in Bavaria. That's although they're part of Bavaria, but it's very important to them that it's Franconia and not Bavaria.
Some like hyper local.
Yeah.
Pride. Yeah. It's like me saying that I'm living in Brooklyn rather than living in New York City, that kind of thing. God forbid someone think that I'm living in Staten Island or something. I don't know. Sorry to anyone who's in Staten Island from here.
Yeah. And they're very proud of their beer culture here. So when in the summer you don't go to a beer garden, you actually go onto a cellar, it's called here, because back in the days, the cellars were below those beer gardens where they stored the beers and kept them cool. So you go to a cellar. The nice thing is you can actually bring your own food. You don't have to buy the food there. You can bring your own. You just have to buy the drinks.
I love bars that are like that. Yeah, you like order from like the good Mexican restaurant, the good pizza restaurant, and then you, yeah.
In Freiburg. Freiburg is a nice place. Definitely. Beautiful city. I just saw the comment of Devin.
Francis, I don't know when the recording is going to be sent out. I don't know if we can promise immediate, like within the second after this is over, but hopefully soon. If immediate means like within a day, maybe. Okay, cool. Let's get started. We have 300 people on the dot, so I think that's a perfect amount of people to get started with. All right. Let me just move this share screen thing. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. Everyone's really busy nowadays, so we really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to talk to us about building a secure, effective, generative AI-based chatbot, parentheses fast, with Snowflake and Dataiku. And just super quick intros before we get to what you all were waiting for. My name is Pat Masi-Phelps. I'm a partner sales engineer with Dataiku. I've been with Dataiku for a little over 6 years, and we are an enterprise AI company. And I'm joined by Carsten,
Yeah, my name is Carsten Weidmann. I'm also a partner sales engineer, but for Snowflake. I joined a little bit more than a year ago, based out of Germany and covering the technology partners, I would say, or data cloud products partners, as we call them, in the EMEA region, and therefore working a lot very closely with Dataiku and Pat, among others.
Yeah, we certainly love working together, hence the webinar today. We feel that our technologies work pretty well together for this kind of use case. Okay, so quick agenda. We're going to try to automate our jobs. Carsten and I have the same job at Dataiku and Snowflake. And so we want to automate it so that Dataiku and Snowflake can lay us off, respectively. It sounds like a good goal for today. So we're going to talk about what are our jobs, how can we automate them. We're going to talk about using LLMs and some different options, how we can improve our LLM generations using RAG, retrieval augmented generation. Then we're going to talk about evaluating LLMs. How do we do? Evaluating is very important in the LLM space. And then finally, how can we deploy our LLM RAG workflow as an enterprise chatbot? How's it sound, Carsten?
Sounds good to me. So maybe let's start with what are actually our jobs. And I assume that many people in tech companies know these type of things that happen. You get a lot of complex or complicated questions on certain topics, like this one here. Actually, that was pulled in from Stack Overflow. I did not answer that, I have to admit. But nevertheless, those are the type of questions we often get, where you have to answer some complicated questions, in this case on some how to create some SQL statement, and then we provide the answer to these questions, right? As I said, from a Snowflake perspective, often it's around SQL. It's maybe also around Snowpark, Python, in the newer days, something like we're gonna also touch today a little bit. But these are typically the questions we get asked and that we answer, and that's something we want to automate today. Yeah, maybe to retire a little bit early.
Yeah, maybe we can, instead of telling Dataiku and Snowflake that we have this chatbot, we can instead automate it behind the scenes so we can continue to remain employed, but kind of retire early. I'd say that's the, but yeah. So also at Dataiku, I do the same thing, right? Like, and I bet this world of answering technical questions or business questions that you as an expert know, and your customers are asking you, or your partners are asking you. This is a huge space, right? So if you look at this example email that I got like back in April, incredibly technical, pretty niche. I have to write some code. So it's kind of a complicated thing, and we maybe can't just use a regular old LLM-based chatbot to do this. And so let's talk about what we're going to do here. So first, we want to use large language models. Large language models are hot. Enterprises are using them. Let's use them today. But a baseline model isn't going to be good enough. So we're going to improve our model with our respective companies' documentation, a corpus of ground truth knowledge to improve these predictions. Then we're going to come up with a framework to evaluate our responses. So it would be irresponsible if Carsten and I just replaced ourselves with the chatbot and didn't understand how well it's going to perform. It needs to be giving correct answers to our customers. And then finally, we're going to deploy this whole workflow as an enterprise level chatbot and interact with it.
So let's start with LLMs. And if we, and you probably heard the news and followed the news, if you looked at also what Snowflake offers, there currently is already a great selection of LLMs available, either via Cortex, one of our bundles where we allow customers to use basically LLMs within their SQL statements, where we have, for example, the Llama, the open source Llama LLMs, or the Mistral ones, but also our own Arctic directly available, or of course also with our Snowpark container services, which means deploying those other models that are available on the market, like Reka, Command R plus Phi2, directly into Snowflake and use them for chat completion, or when we, as we mentioned before, because we need to embed, one needs to use a RAG and embed it. In order to generate that, we again have Arctic available in different sizes, basically directly in Snowflake in Cortex, or the eBase v2 from Hugging Face, but also from Cohere or other models from Hugging Face that you can use directly in Snowflake, either via Cortex, that means the function is directly available in there, or using Snowpark Container Services, where you have to deploy the model in Snowflake, but then can directly also use it.
And just to add, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Just to add my well, semi-unbiased opinion from the Dataiku side, I've worked with some Snowflake models in Cortex and in Snowpark Container Services now, and I think if you want something that's easy and scalable and a really good model, Cortex is your best bet. However, I have talked with some customers who want some niche, fine-tuned model from Hugging Face that's specific to like the medical domain. Yeah. Then you'll want to use Snowpark Container Services to deploy those like really niche models, or maybe do some fine-tuning. So just kind of how I think about the two. So we'll be using both today, actually, and I'll call out when we're using each one. So then on the Dataiku side, Dataiku is a platform for building enterprise-grade LLM solutions, or any other data-driven solution or traditional machine learning solution, right? And so in Dataiku, we have these LLM-powered recipes for arbitrary prompt engineering, text classification, summarization. You can use RAGs. You can easily create a knowledge bank from an embedding model. And we can easily create AI assistants and chatbots in this tool. And so Dataiku has all of these different connections to LLMs, vector stores, including the Snowflake LLM offerings, Cortex and Snowpark Container Services. So we're going to be using these two tools today to show you guys how to build this chatbot to replace our jobs. So this is more of just an architecture diagram for anyone who's interested. So Dataiku is going to be our UI. But as we are building a workflow, including data ingestion, data prep, and then connecting to these LLMs on Snowpark Container Services in Cortex, basically like Dataiku is going to be the UI and Snowflake is going to be the compute behind the scenes here. All right. So we're going to do a quick little demo. And we're going to flip back and forth between demo and slides just to keep things interesting. So in Dataiku, if any of you guys haven't seen Dataiku before, this is just a shared platform for building data science and AI-based workflows. And so we have this Prompt Studio feature where you can test out different prompts. And so one question that I might get as a Dataiku technical person is, how can I install a new Python package in a code environment in Dataiku? And so we can enter this prompt and then choose an LLM from this dropdown. And so you can see all these different LLMs that we have available to us. But I'm going to choose Snowflake Arctic from Cortex as a first one. And let's run this prompt and see how it does. Okay. Now, let's see how it does by pulling up a Dataiku code environment right next to it. Okay, so this says, first, go to the DSS instance and open the project where you want to install the package. Okay, so that's the first mistake, right? There's no way to install a package from within the project level. It's supposed to be kind of at the instance-wide level. Then click on the code menu in the top navigation bar and select code envs. So there's no code menu bar, but there is code envs. In the code envs page, click on the code environment where you want to install the package. Okay, cool. Maybe it's this one. Click on the packages to install tab. That's pretty good. And then click on the add button to add a new package, right? And so there's no add button here, right? And so the gist of this is that we're just using a baseline LLM that's been trained on whatever Snowflake has used to train this LLM. I don't know, Carsten, do you know specifically what the Arctic model has been trained on?
No, to be honest, I don't.
It's kind of the secret sauce of all these companies, right? And so you can say the same about Mistral, Llama 2, Gemma, all these companies. There's rumors about what it's been trained on, right? Whether it's like Reddit data or YouTube transcripts or New York Times or whatever. But you can see that it can generate something that looks real, but in reality, it's not. It's actually hallucinating here, and this is giving us an incorrect answer. So another thing you can do is you can try out different models and see if a different one acts differently. So here we're trying Mistral Large, also available through Cortex. And for those of you who have been keeping track of the never-ending LLM leaderboard, Mistral Large is a pretty good LLM. And this one's actually also hallucinating. There's no pip install actually involved in the Dataiku process of like adding a new package. And so both these LLMs have hallucinated and given us incorrect answers. So what are we going to do about that? We want to improve our generations using RAG. And we're going to walk you through how this solution is going to work today.
Right. So first, we need to gather some documents with information that actually is helpful. In our case, it'll be the documentation on Dataiku and on Snowflake and others that will be helpful to actually augment the capabilities of the LLM to then give us a better answer to our question.
Yeah. And then once we get those documents, we're going to break them up into chunks because we can't pass in a million documents at the same time into these LLMs. They have limitations called these context windows. So we're going to break them up into chunks of maybe 1,000 characters at a time. And to do that, we're going to use something called an embedding LLM, which will take these chunks of text and turn them into vectors based on their semantic meaning. So, these are other large language models that have been trained to understand the human language and like turn these text blocks into numbers, into vectors.
Yeah. Then basically, based on the question the user asked, we'll pull in with a smart retriever the relevant chunks of that from that vector store from the RAG that we just created to then pass it on, and that's basically the last step, to then pass it on by a prompt template to the LLM, basically injecting the information that we initially got out of our documents that we used in the vector store to then inject that into the question plus the relevant information to the LLM, so that it can then produce the answer, or the hopefully correct and more relevant answer to the question that was asked by the user.
Yeah, one of our other partners, the CEO of TitanML, Miriam, had a really good analogy, and she was like, the current state of large language models is that they're kind of like having a million interns available to you that can give you responses really quickly, but they're still interns. And so they're still going to give you some incorrect responses. And so by using RAG, by giving the interns clues into like, here are the relevant documents that you should be looking at as you're answering this question, the LLM is much more likely to give you a correct answer. So I really like that analogy that Miriam had. Cool. And so in Dataiku, we have this prompt engineering screen, right? I'm going to go out to this project here, right? And so if you haven't seen Dataiku before, the blue squares are data sets, in this case stored as Snowflake tables. And the circles are transformations to get from one table to another. And so these are a couple of Python scripts that we use to scrape the Dataiku documentation and the Snowflake documentation. So if I just preview this table right here and hover over the text, you can see that I'm just storing a bunch of text about, sorry, Carsten, like boring SQL type information, like floats. But it's also equally boring on the Dataiku side. I've got like
SQL is so old that it's really, really boring. Yeah.
Extra boring content for the LLM, right? That's why we automate this stuff. And so then basically we just need to open up this embed recipe. And we're going to say, please embed the text column and give us the source, Dataiku or Snowflake, and the URL. And we can tune the chunk size of our chunks to feed into the LLM. And so this is one way to tune your RAG process, is increasing or decreasing this amount of chunks. I'm going to start out with 1,000. And here we're actually going to use an embedding model on Snowpark container services, just to show you what that's like. And so this will then turn the Dataiku and Snowflake documentation. We're going to chunk it up into like 1,000 characters at a time, and turn these into vectors, into sets of numbers that we can then pass into our LLM later on. And just to give you guys a sense of that, so we have about 12,000 document snippets here, and running this embedding function through Snowpark Container Services. And this is a really small LLM, a small LM, I guess. Just takes about 22 seconds, so not too bad. But once we've done that, we can go back into our prompt studio and see how our LM is doing. So maybe I can copy this same prompt. And now I'm going to choose my retrieval augmented LLMs. And let's choose Snowflake Arctic again, but this time it's going to be pulling from that knowledge base. So just as Carsten mentioned, the process is we're going to take this question and then find the nearest, I think it's 4 vectors from our knowledge base, and then pass those vectors along with the question into the LM to ultimately answer the question. And so now let's see if we can do this successfully again. Okay, so go to the code environments page in Dataiku. Let's select the code environment where we want to install the package. Click on the manage button. Okay, so there's no manage button, but there is a requested packages section. And here we can type the name of the package version. So, I don't know. Scikit-learn. If using a Python code environment for visual machine learning or deep learning, Dataiku can automatically populate the requested packages field. So I think it's going for this here. And then we click Save and Update. And then we can see the list of packages in the installed packages panel. Okay, so it seems like it's still not quite hit it, but it's done a pretty good job. It's got the Save and Update button. It's got the requested packages list. I think this is not too bad. But I think it's also important to try out different LLMs, right? So we can also try the retrieval augmented Mistral model, see how that performs. Okay. Requested packages section. Type the name of the package, save and update. Cool. And you can see that it gives us sources too. That's pretty cool. So this is the pieces of Dataiku documentation that were fed into the model. So this way, it's like a good way to build trust in your LLM generated outputs. Cool. So it looks like our LLMs are performing a little bit better. But yeah, we we got to evaluate it, right, Carsten? How do we evaluate this?
Well, I mean, when we evaluate things, of course, there's let's start with the context. Oh no, let's start with the question. We can check the answer if the answer is relevant to the question. So that way we can check is what quality the LLM has. Is the answer correct? That's then the ground truth, right? When the answer was created, is that correct, or did it hallucinate? We just saw in the first when Pat ran the first prompt without the RAG, that answer was not really correct. Probably would have been correct if you were in a standard Python environment and had to do the pip install and stuff like that, but not in a Dataiku environment. Is the answer faithful to the context? That's now for a German hard to explain how to best do that. But then is the context that we gave also in this case helpful to answer the question? That means, were the documents that were selected, for example, from the RAG, were they actually really helpful to answer the question in the correct way? There we also saw that the first, using the Octic model, that was not 100%. There were some things missing. Could be that the context was maybe just too small for that model. Maybe the smart solver should have picked more documents to pass on, or more, not more documents, but more tokens to pass on to the LLM. But that way, only if the answer is correct, the answer is actually relevant to the question. I mean, that's the first thing, if it's correct. If it's faithful to the context that we gave, and is the context helpful to answer the question, only then, if all that is true, then we can say that the LLM has performed well. Otherwise, there apparently have been areas where it has been missing a bit, right? And that's also where you start to tune. I mean, we just scraped a bunch of documents, hopefully picked the right ones. We could, of course, also go back and see were actually the documents that we used as an input the correct ones. I hear a lot of cars honking.
Oh, sorry. The streets are angry.
What did we provide the right context? I mean, did we provide the right documents to answer these questions? Maybe we should have gone deeper, picked different documentations, added more of the documentation to then make it maybe easier for the smart solver also to provide the right RAG, the right tokens to the LLM to then be able to generate the correct answer to our question, or the more precise answer. Maybe some bits, as you realized, the Octic model, there was this requested packages part a little bit missing, or it was not 100% clear. Maybe the documents we provided just missed that step, or had it only in a picture that wasn't extracted properly. So that's also something we then have to look at and go back and adjust our fine-tuning in that area.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this whole LLM RAG pipeline it's a system, and it's not just the question and the generated answer. It's also the context, it's also the ground truth. And so there are all these metrics that are being created out there in the industry to help measure the relationship between each of these different things. And so, we really recommend that you guys use all of these metrics. So sorry for the honking outside my window. So let's take a look at how you might do that, right? And so in our project, right, we took our documentation corpuses and we created our vector embeddings. And what we can do is pass in a list of sample questions. And I think this is a good practice if you're building an enterprise chatbot or any other LLM application, honestly, where you have an example question or an example prompt and then a reference answer. So you'll have to manually create this, but I think it's a good way to ensure the quality of your LLM outputs. And so once you have these example questions and reference answers, we can run these through our prompt. Oh my gosh, so sorry. So we can run these through our prompt. So we're using our retrieval augmented LLMs here. And I can run this, say 4 different times using Arctic, Llama 2, Mistral Large, and maybe even a custom LLM on Snowpark Container Services like Zephyr Beta. And I can then use, let's say, a framework like RAGS. So if you Google RAGS, it's just an open source Python package for evaluating LLMs. And then we can see how our different LLMs perform. So here we have 2 metrics that Carsten mentioned. We have faithfulness and answer relevancy. And so here, a 1.0 is a perfect score, and the higher the better. So this is a nice way to take your reference questions, run it through some of these common LLM evaluation frameworks, and choose the best one, right? So here we can see that Llama 2 70 billion records seem to do the best. And I think someone had a question in the chat, and I promise we'll get to the questions in the chat more thoroughly in a second, but they asked, how do I choose a baseline LLM? And I think that answer is that it's really hard to choose a baseline LLM. And I might have some suggestions of places to start. I think these 3 are really good places to start. Llama and Mistral and Arctic are all really solid large language models. Start with those, but ultimately you should be testing them all, and then choose the one with the best results. I don't know, Carsten, how do you feel about choosing a model and evaluating it?
It's as you said. I mean, you don't just stick with one, but actually try at least a second one and probably a third one, and maybe even some odd one you come across, but maybe that was trained initially already for that specific area you're working on, like we mentioned the health specific model or whatever, to make sure, or to test and make sure that you choose then in the end the best one. And even that one, as we know, I mean, we've seen those benchmarks all over the place, right? One model against the other. How good did it perform in that test? This one won in this one, but lost in the other one. I mean, it is difficult. It is difficult to say this is the right one to choose. In this case, apparently Llama is doing really good. So maybe go with Llama for that case. But could be that it's nevertheless imperative, in my opinion, to always check the answers, to always make sure, to always double check. And if you're using LLMs in your enterprise environment, and make sure the LLM ops part will then pop up at one point. Mm-hmm. And that feedback loop, especially that human feedback loop, is very, very important to make sure that you can actually augment the quality of the LLM during its life cycles, and when you're using it.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we'll talk about human feedback in one sec. But first, one more slide. So, right, the last step, once we have our RAG process and our LLM and our knowledge bank and our eval framework, we need to actually deploy a RAG app as a chatbot. And so Dataiku has a chatbot plugin called Answers, which is a prepackaged scalable web app. It's really easy to set up. It's customizable, which we'll see in a second. And it's governed by being within Dataiku, and in this case, accessing LLMs in Snowflake. So it's a really good solution for enterprise chatbots. Okay, so let's check out what that web app looks like. So this is the UI. And if I click in this edit backend, we're going to configure some things for this chatbot. So first off, we want to log all user queries and LLM responses. I think this is a core tenet of an enterprise level chatbot. We need a recorded history of everything that's hitting this thing. We're not going to automate our jobs without any security around it. Okay, and then we want to offer some positive and negative feedback options for users. So we want to give folks the opportunity to say good or bad response. And then we're going to log this in a data set. Then we're going to choose our LLM from here. So here's where we gotta determine our eval framework. What's our best LLM? In this case, we're just going to use Arctic because this is a Snowflake webinar and I kind of like Arctic lately. We're going to choose our knowledge bank and a couple other things that you can take a look at in the web app documentation. But this is what it looks like. And so we can have a couple example questions for our lovely customers and non-customers in the crowd, so that you don't have to email Carsten and I anymore. You can just interact with this chatbot. And so, Carsten, what do you think about this question? Should we try with the knowledge bank and see?
Sure. Let's see what it brings back.
And we can even say, like, filter this only to Snowflake sources, right? So we can limit the knowledge bank. Okay. We can see those filters here, right? So we can see that we're only pulling from Snowflake. Okay. How do you feel about this answer, Carsten?
Looks, especially when you look at monetizing, it's Snowflake Marketplace, definitely, but also via private listing, to specific consumers. That's where you want to do that private listing. Yes. Perfect. Okay. Very much to the point.
Cool. And I like this little feature of adding the sources. So this way you can pop it open and see literally where in the Snowflake documentation does it talk about distributing and monetizing the Snowflake native app, which is pretty cool. Let's try it for Dataiku too, because we can't just automate your job. We gotta. I want to retire as well. Okay, so let's do Dataiku now. And again, we'll ask. I actually haven't even tested this one, so this will be a true live demo. In what ways can Dataiku leverage Snowflake Java UDFs? Kind of a difficult question. Okay, Dataiku can leverage Snowflake Java UDFs to perform extended pushdown capabilities, allowing for more efficient and customized data processing. This is possible by leveraging unique Snowflake features. Okay, so this is top level correct. The Dataiku is able to push more compute down to Snowflake via Java UDFs than other compute sources. But I might want to ask it where specifically, any particular Dataiku recipes? Let's see what it says. Okay, awesome. In database scoring of ML models, Dataiku's experimental support for leveraging Java UDF allows for faster, up to 3 times faster, in database scoring of ML models. Awesome. This is absolutely correct, and we can see this from the knowledge bank. So I think this is really cool, Carsten. I think we can. We can retire. What do you think?
We need it.
Cool. So I think that's all we had for content. Any other final thoughts, Carsten, before we dip into the questions?
I think, what did we show today? I think it was very easy, and that could be seen, very easy to set up a Dataiku with Snowflake and create a chatbot with not only just a regular LLM, but actually with a dictionary with documents in addition for a specific topic. I guess the web app that everyone saw now in the end, it's just brilliant because that's so easy and quick to do. We had some prep steps. We didn't show all in detail how it went through, but actually it was just taking the documents, running those through the workflow. We also had the little test that we did with those sample questions and answers to score the quality of the model. I mean, everyone saw or could see that it's a very easy approach to create a chatbot that with those tools in combination, you can be right there. With Snowflake, you have Cortex and already have a set of LLMs. I saw one question that asked about deploying a specific or private LLM in or could be deployed. Yes, you can. As we mentioned, with Snowflake Container Services, you can also deploy your own private LLM if you have one, if you have a company-specific one that is then only visible to you. It sits inside your Snowflake account. Practically any LLM you deploy with Snowflake Container Services sits only within your Snowflake account. Only you have access to it. That model, if you want to augment it with a RAG, if you want to use documents or data that you have stored in your database, that data will never leave your Snowflake environment. It won't be seen by anyone else. That LLM lives there. So you can that way specifically create a language model and then use it with Dataiku, for example, with a chatbot on your data to then find answers to very specific questions that you have, and maybe then also make your job obsolete. Who knows about that? But that's, yeah, you can deploy those private LLMs, and that's also something very important. We don't only ship those with Cortex, the general ones, but actually you can use any LLM you would like to. Just throw them into a Snowflake Container Services and you're good to go. And then use Dataiku to actually then have an easy-to-use method to work with these.
Well put.
There's a few questions in the chat. Do you want me to, and we only have a few minutes, Pat and Carsten, but I think there's a couple others that might be quick answers. Ben is asking, and I think the essence of his question, he's asking how we bring LLMs to prompt services. I think he means prompt studios. And I think the essence of that question is really like, how do you set up the connections? So maybe, Pat, you can just quickly maybe re-show the LLM mesh and show how those actually get added.
Yeah, totally. So in the Dataiku platform, we have this administration screen. And here in enterprise, typically like an IT team can set up a connection to any LLM provider. So Snowflake Cortex is the one that we use today, but you can also set up connections using your OpenAI API key, your Anthropic API key, SageMaker, whatever else. And so you just enter in a name of just like blah, and then you check off which models you want to use in Snowflake Cortex. And then those LLMs are available everywhere in Dataiku, including this Prompt Studio location right here. So you can see all the different LLMs that I have available here. Just they align with these connections where I've entered in my credentials and keys and stuff. Cool. And I think someone else asked what other options to Snowflake can we use. And so it's basically all of the LLM providers listed here. So all of the common ones. But we really do like Snowflake, especially with Mistral Large, Arctic, Llama. It's pretty good.
The most popular questions are around, can we get a copy of this project to try on our own Dataiku instance? So we have some Dataiku users in the audience that are curious to play with it. And can we get a tutorial? I think in our follow-up, we'll include a couple of links to tutorials that we have existing. It won't be for this like specific project, but just in general, we'll include lots of resources in the follow-up. But Pat, I guess I'll throw it to you on regarding like a copy of this exact project for people to try.
Yeah, I think I feel like it'd be less efficient to give you guys like a zip file of this project, but instead, yeah, I want to point you guys to our gallery. So gallery.dataiku.com, and I'll just paste that in the chat. And this is our public read-only gallery Dataiku instance, and there are a ton of sample projects here, including, like Lynn mentioned, that that LLM starter kit, which is just like how to do everything LLM related in Dataiku. And then there's another newer one that one of our data science colleagues, I think Caroline built this. This is an advanced RAG workflow. So this is like different advanced techniques for RAG using pretty cool stuff like hybrid search. And if you want to know more about this, you can always go to the wikis in each project, which fully describe what's going on with these different approaches. So this one's pretty cool, especially if you're interested in RAG use cases. Okay, let's see.
There is also a question about the top question right now is about non-English language coverage using LLMs and embeddings. Could you say a few words about non-English?
Yeah, I know there are some other enterprise and open source ones that cover non-English. Carsten, do you know for the Snowflake ones for like Cortex?
Yeah, I mean, we have those that translate function, for example, in Cortex, and it's not 100% perfect yet. So English is probably the main language that works really well. Other languages might be a little bit a hit and a miss. So maybe one remembers the early days of Google Translate. If you use that, that sometimes seems a little bit like that. So, but I mean, these language models are improving all the time. You see it with OpenAI. They just released a new one. So I would assume that in the not too distant future, it will be irrelevant of what language you use. So right now, I would say English probably is still the better choice as a language, or more. The answers will be more precise and more correct with English, but otherwise that's improving, and I don't think it'll take a long time till the other languages are as good. Maybe some exotic ones take a little bit longer. That remains to be seen.
Yeah, totally. The space is moving so quickly. There are fine-tuned versions of especially the open source Mistral and Llama models out there on Hugging Face that are fine-tuned for other languages. And so I think if you want to do that, yeah, you can just deploy one of those other language models to Snowpark Container Services and then connect to it in the same way that we showed you here. Yeah, so I think Cohere's like multilingual embedding model, I think, is the best embedding model out there. And then for chat completion, I think there are like language specific ones.
Yeah,
you can check out.
Just a question from Brajesh on the Cortex LLM model, Snowflake Cortex LLM model. Paid? No. These are all open source that we use in Cortex, like Llama, Mistral, and Arctic especially as well. They're all open source. You don't have to pay for them. You just pay for the compute, but otherwise, yeah.
It's like a per token cost, right?
Don't ask me about the details of that.
I think it's per token, which is the same. That's the same way that all of the LLMs charge.
Yeah.
And I think Cortex is pretty price competitive relative to the other ones.
While we're on the topic of cost, there was a second question about cost. For you, Carsten, is there any cost associated with having Snowpark Container Services as an existing Snowflake user?
Yes, there is the cost as you spin up with Snowpark Container Services. You spin up a dedicated compute pool, different types of compute engines available there. They're separate from your warehouses that you use, and for these, there will be compute costs depending on what type of machine you use, with GPUs, without GPUs, just like it would be with a regular cloud provider if you would spin up an EC2 instance on AWS. So there is a cost associated to that. Yeah. But again, you can also turn them off and then no cost. So it's just when compute is running.
Right. And I think that's that's generally the case with all LLMs, right? Is that either you go through a hosting service like Cortex or like like OpenAI, or you deploy open source models, but then you pay for the GPUs and the infrastructure. And so I think, there are no free lunches in the world of Gen AI, unfortunately. Someone had a question about how would you evaluate context relevance of an LLM response? And the answer is just using that RAGUS framework that I mentioned before. So there's this open source library called RAGUS, and they have an answer relevancy and faithfulness metrics. So just take a look at the RAGUS documentation to understand kind of the nuances of context relevance to question and response and all that stuff.
Great. I think we're already a little over time, and most of the questions were answered. I guess I'll close us out. As Joy mentioned at the top of the session, you will receive the recording. It might take a day to receive it via email. If you cannot wait, you can come back to the same page on which you signed up for this session, and you'll be able to see it immediately on demand. It just might take us a day-ish to send you the actual email, but you will get the follow-up recording along with additional resources. We'll include the gallery links that Pat had mentioned and any other resources around Dataiku answers that some people had asked about. So thank you so much, Pat and Carsten, and to Joy for kicking off the session. And we'll see you at the next Gen AI Bootcamp, hopefully. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Carsten.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Lynn. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.